The colony's fall. The colony of New Horizons stood on the edge of a vast, uncharted planet. It had been a dream of humanity to build a new home on a distant world, and for years the settlers lived peacefully, growing crops, building homes, and exploring the stars. But that dream was shattered in an instant. It all started early in the morning. The skies were clear, the sun rising over the distant horizon, as children played in the fields and workers went about their daily tasks. The air was filled with the sounds of life. Birds chirping, engines humming, and the laughter of families. Everything seemed normal, peaceful, and serene. But deep in space, an alien fleet had already set its sights on the colony. The first signs of danger came when the colony's communication systems suddenly went silent. At first, it was just a glitch, something easily ignored. But when the main communication tower went down, panic spread. The colony's leaders, Commander Rachel Hall and Chief Engineer Marcus Leung, gathered in the control room, trying to make sense of the situation. All their efforts to reach Earth were met with dead silence. Something was wrong, something they couldn't explain. "We need to find out what's happening," Rachel said, her voice firm but filled with concern. She knew something bigger was at play. "Marcus, check the satellite feeds. We need to see what's out there." Marcus nodded, tapping a few buttons on his console. The feed flickered, and a massive shadow appeared on the screen. It wasn't a storm, not a natural phenomenon. It was something far worse. A fleet of alien ships, unlike anything humanity had ever encountered, loomed in the sky. Their sleek, dark shapes were like nothing seen before, alien and terrifying. These ships were massive, powerful, and they had come with only one purpose: to destroy. "Rachel," Marcus whispered, his voice trembling. "We're under attack." Rachel's heart raced, but she didn't allow fear to control her. "Alert everyone. We need to evacuate the civilians now," she ordered, her voice steady. The entire colony went into chaos as alarms blared, and people ran in every direction, trying to escape. But there was nowhere to run. The alien fleet had already begun its assault. The first explosions shook the ground. Bright flashes of light lit up the sky as massive energy blasts ripped through the colony's infrastructure. Buildings crumbled to the ground in seconds, and the once thriving city was reduced to rubble. The invaders didn't give anyone a chance to fight back. They were ruthless, efficient, and unstoppable. Rachel watched from the control room as the colony's defenses were torn apart. "Where are our defenses?" she shouted. "Why aren't they firing back?" We didn't expect anything like this," Marcus replied, his voice strained. "Our weapons are outdated compared to theirs. We never thought we'd need anything more." The words stung Rachel like a slap in the face. They had built this colony, but they hadn't prepared for the worst-case scenario. And now, the worst had come. As the alien ships continued their bombardment, Rachel knew there was no escaping this. She turned to Marcus. "We have to send out a distress signal to Earth. They need to know what's happening here." But as she spoke, another explosion rocked the room. The lights flickered, and the walls trembled. The control panel began to spark, and the monitors went black. The colony's last line of defense was gone. "We're losing it, Rachel," Marcus said, panic rising in his voice. "It's over." Rachel refused to believe that. She had spent years building this colony, and she couldn't let it fall so easily. She ran to the communications panel, desperately trying to send a signal. "This is Commander Rachel Hall of New Horizon Colony. We are under attack by an unknown alien force. The fleet is too powerful. We need immediate assistance. Earth, do you hear us? Please, help us." Her words echoed into the void of space, but there was no response. The sky above them turned dark as more alien ships appeared, forming a massive blockade around the planet. The few remaining fighters tried to take off, but they were no match for the overwhelming force that surrounded them. One by one, the colony's ships were shot down, their pilots never to be seen again. Rachel stood there, helpless. She watched as the last of the colony's defenses were obliterated, and her heart sank. Her people were being slaughtered, and there was nothing she could do to stop it. The aliens had come, and they were not interested in diplomacy or negotiation. They only wanted one thing: total destruction. With the colony's final transmission sent into the void, Rachel knew it was only a matter of time before they, too, would be wiped out. Her thoughts turned to Earth, to humanity's home planet, where the people would never know what had happened here, what had been lost. She hoped, prayed even, that Earth would respond. But deep down, she knew it was too late. The final blow came as a massive alien ship hovered over the last standing building. A bright beam of light shot down, and the entire structure disintegrated in an instant. Everything was gone. The colony, the people, the dream. They had all vanished without a trace. In the silence that followed, Rachel's voice was the last sound to echo in the empty control room. "I'm sorry, Earth. We failed you." And then, there was nothing. The once thriving colony of New Horizon lay in ruins, its fate sealed by the merciless alien invaders. The war had begun, and humanity had yet to even know the full extent of the danger they were about to face. The silence that followed the destruction of New Horizon was deafening. The stars in the sky appeared untouched, as if nothing had happened. But below, where the colony once thrived, nothing remained but ashes and smoldering ruins. The loss was catastrophic, and the few survivors scattered across the barren remains of the colony could only watch in despair. Among the survivors was Commander Rachel Hall, still reeling from the devastation. She had narrowly escaped the final bombardment, taking shelter in a deep underground bunker with a handful of others. They had no idea where the aliens had gone or if they would return to finish the job. The distress signal she had sent to Earth echoed unanswered, leaving her feeling more isolated than ever. The weight of failure pressed down on her chest. For hours, Rachel couldn't bring herself to speak. She watched as the survivors huddled together, fear written on their faces. There was no plan, no way to fight back. The overwhelming force of the alien fleet had crushed them in mere hours. But Rachel knew that she couldn't just sit here, waiting to die. She couldn't let the sacrifice of those who had fallen be in vain. The survivors had gathered around a makeshift table, trying to get the remaining communications equipment to work. It was a long shot, but Rachel wasn't ready to give up. With her hands shaking, she managed to get the system online. The static buzzed for a moment before a voice finally came through the speakers. "This is the Earth Defense Command," the voice said, crackling through the broken signal. "We've received your distress call, but we have no current fleet available. Please." Rachel slammed her fist against the table, her voice rising in frustration. "You have no fleet available. We were wiped out in hours. We need help. If Earth doesn't send something, we're all dead. Do you hear me?" The voice on the other end paused. For a moment, Rachel thought the line had gone dead again. But then the voice spoke once more, quieter this time. "We understand, Commander. I'll do what I can to relay your message. Hold tight." And just like that, the line went silent again. Rachel stared at the screen in disbelief. She had expected Earth to respond, to send a fleet, but what they had told her only fueled her anger. The people of Earth had let them down. It wasn't just a colony anymore. It was a massacre. But there was no time for dwelling on that. She had to focus on what came next. There was only one thing left to do: make the aliens pay. On Earth, the news of the attack on New Horizon spread quickly. The people of Earth were in shock. They had long known of humanity's expansion into the stars, but they had never expected such an assault. News reports flashed across screens everywhere, showing images of the colony in flames and survivors fighting for their lives. In the United Nations headquarters, emergency meetings were being held. The council members were frantic, arguing amongst themselves. Some suggested negotiating with the aliens, offering peaceful terms to avoid further destruction. Others, including high-ranking military officers, believed it was time to respond with force. General Edward Briggs, the commander of Earth's most advanced military division, stood before the council, his voice calm but unwavering. "We can't let this slide. New Horizon wasn't just another colony. It was a symbol of humanity's expansion. If we let this attack go unanswered, we'll show the universe that we're weak. That will only invite more threats." "But we don't know who these aliens are," one of the council members argued. "We don't know their motives. What if they want peace?" "Peace." General Briggs shook his head. "They didn't come here for peace. They came here to destroy. They showed no mercy, no willingness to talk. They killed innocent people. And now we must make them pay." The council debated for hours, trying to come to a decision. The tension was palpable. As they discussed strategies, Briggs made a move that would change everything. He stepped forward, his eyes steely with determination. "I don't need permission from the council," he said. "I will assemble the fleet. We have the resources minus 700,000 warships, fully equipped, ready to fight. If we don't respond now, humanity's place in the galaxy will be nothing but a forgotten relic." The room went silent. A few members exchanged nervous glances, but none spoke up. Finally, the head of the council nodded. "Make it happen, General." And just like that, the wheels of war began to turn. Back on the shattered remains of New Horizon, Rachel's desperation grew as hours turned into days. The survivors had managed to establish a makeshift camp, but the future seemed uncertain. The aliens had not returned, but there was no way of knowing when or if they would strike again. They were a powerful force, and humanity's strength was not enough to fight them on their own. But the message from Earth had given Rachel a spark of hope. Earth hadn't abandoned them. The humans were not yet defeated. Help was on the way. Rachel's thoughts were interrupted by the sudden crackle of a transmission. She rushed to the communications console, her heart racing. This time, it was a familiar voice. General Edward Briggs. "This is General Briggs. I'm sending you the reinforcements you asked for. We're launching the entire fleet. 700,000 warships are on their way. You're not alone anymore." Rachel felt her heart soar. This was the answer she had been waiting for. The retaliation had begun. The fleet would come, and with it, a chance for humanity to show the invaders just how far they were willing to go to protect their people. She looked out over the barren landscape of New Horizon, her mind filled with a renewed sense of purpose. They had lost everything, but now they would fight back. They would not be crushed. Humanity would rise. With the fleet on its way, it was time for the real war to begin. The aliens had made a mistake, underestimating humanity. And now, they would learn just how deadly humans could be when pushed to the brink. The cold vacuum of space was silent, but it was far from peaceful. Across Earth's solar system, the preparations for war were already underway. The fleet that General Edward Briggs had promised was unlike any humanity had ever assembled before. It was a sight to behold, a testament to the might of the human race. 700,000 warships, each one equipped with state-of-the-art weaponry, advanced shielding systems, and battle-hardened crews, were being readied for the fight of their lives. For the first time, Earth's various military branches worked together as one: Army, Navy, and Air Force, united by the sole purpose of revenge and retribution. The fleet was massive, stretching across the expanse of space like a shadow blotting out the stars. Each ship was a symbol of humanity's resilience and their unwillingness to back down from a challenge. The ships were not only designed for war, but also for survival in the harsh conditions of deep space. Some were specialized for long-range combat, with missile systems capable of striking from tens of thousands of kilometers away. Others were heavily armored dreadnoughts, built to stand their ground against overwhelming forces. And there were the carriers, bristling with countless fighters and support craft, ready to swarm any enemy ship that dared to come too close. As the fleet began its journey toward New Horizons' coordinates, the atmosphere on Earth was tense. People were glued to their screens, watching the reports as they came in. The news outlets broadcasted the fleet's progress, showing live feeds of the warships being deployed and the crew members preparing for battle. Across the globe, there was a sense of unity, as if every person, no matter where they were, could feel the weight of what was about to happen. The survivors of New Horizon, stranded on the ruined colony, anxiously watched the communication systems, hoping for any update on the fleet's status. They knew the battle was far from over, but the arrival of such a powerful force gave them hope. They could almost hear the engines of the warships in their minds, a reminder that help was on the way. Rachel Hall, the commanding officer of the survivors, stood at the front of their small camp, gazing out into the distance. "We'll make them pay," Rachel muttered under her breath, her fist clenched in determination. The sound of the fleet's arrival was a promise that Earth would not allow the slaughter of innocent people to go unpunished. As the fleet neared the outer reaches of the solar system, General Briggs stood on the bridge of the flagship, the Elysium, staring at the vast expanse of stars before him. Behind him, his crew was hard at work, coordinating the arrival of each warship and finalizing the attack plans. Every detail had been accounted for, every strategy discussed, but there was still a sense of uncertainty. They were about to enter uncharted territory, facing a foe whose tactics and technology were unknown. Could humanities might truly stand up to an alien force of unknown capabilities? The question lingered in the back of everyone's mind. But there was no turning back now. Briggs turned to his tactical officer, Lieutenant Sarah Grant, who was reviewing the mission's final details on her holographic display. "What's our current position?" "We're about 48 hours out from the New Horizon coordinates, sir," she replied. "Our fleet is in formation. No sign of the enemy yet, but we're not expecting them to wait long." Briggs nodded. "They've made their move. Now it's time for us to make ours." He looked out at the stars again. The weight of what was about to happen pressed down on him. Earth's survival was hanging by a thread, and the fall of New Horizon had made it clear that they couldn't afford to fail. The alien forces had struck with ruthless precision, and now humanity would answer with overwhelming power. Back on the ruined colony, Rachel and the other survivors received an update. Just a faint signal, but enough to send a jolt of adrenaline through her veins. The fleet was on its way. They could finally fight back. But that wasn't enough to ease the weight on her heart. The memory of the destruction was fresh in her mind, the faces of the people she had lost, the screams of those who hadn't been able to escape in time. How many more lives would be lost before the war was over? Rachel gathered the survivors together, her expression grim but determined. They were in no condition to fight just yet, but they would need to be ready. She briefed them on the incoming fleet and made it clear that they would have to hold their ground until reinforcements arrived. "Stay strong," she told them, her voice carrying the weight of a leader who had just witnessed unimaginable loss. "We fight for those we've lost, for every person who's still out there waiting for us to return." The survivors nodded, some with hope flickering in their eyes for the first time since the attack. The fleet was coming. Humanity wasn't finished yet. In the vastness of space, as the fleet continued its journey to the outer rim of the solar system, the tension was palpable. Commanders across the warships were busy making final preparations for the confrontation. Strategies were being finalized, and every ship's crew was fully aware of what was at stake. In the control room of the Elysium, General Briggs' voice came over the comms, reaching every ship in the fleet. "Soldiers of Earth, we have one mission: to avenge the destruction of New Horizon, to make sure that no alien force ever thinks they can come to our home and get away with it. The fleet is moving forward, and nothing will stand in our way. Prepare yourselves for what comes next. Humanity is about to show the galaxy what we're made of." As the fleet moved closer to their destination, the survivors on New Horizon clung to the hope that help would arrive in time. With every passing minute, the sound of war grew louder, and humanity's retaliation was no longer a question. It was a certainty. The fleet was coming, and it would not be stopped. In just 2 days, the fate of New Horizon, and perhaps the future of humanity itself, would be decided. The fleet was nearly upon them. General Edward Briggs stood at the heart of the Elysium, his hands clasped behind his back as he surveyed the tactical display. The ships of Earth's 700,000-strong fleet were positioned in a battle formation, each ship ready for action. It had taken nearly 2 days for the fleet to reach the coordinates of the destroyed New Horizon colony. And now, as the alien forces came into view, the tension was unbearable. "I've never seen anything like it," Lieutenant Sarah Grant whispered, her eyes glued to the screen. A massive alien battle fleet loomed before them, unlike anything humanity had ever encountered. Hundreds of alien warships, each one brimming with alien technology, hung in space, their black and silver hulls sleek and menacing. They seemed to move with a precision that only years of experience could cultivate. But the humans had one thing the aliens didn't: the will to fight. "Can we get a read on their capabilities?" Briggs asked. Grant tapped away at the controls, her eyes narrowing. "Their ships are heavily armored, but their energy signatures are strange. We're still not sure about their weapon systems, but I can tell you this much: this is not going to be easy." Briggs remained silent for a moment, his gaze fixed on the alien fleet. He knew what was at stake. Humanity wasn't just fighting for revenge. They were fighting for survival. These alien invaders had shown no mercy when they obliterated New Horizon, and Earth could not afford to show any mercy in return. "We won't back down," he muttered to himself. "We'll make them regret underestimating us." In the dark expanse of space, the first shot was fired. It wasn't much more than a spark, a brief flash of light, but it was enough to signal the beginning of the end. The alien fleet had opened fire, launching high-powered energy blasts toward the human warships. The Elysium shook as the first blast made contact with its shields, the impact reverberating through every deck. But the ship held steady. "Shields holding," Sarah reported, "but they've got us in their sights." "Return fire," Briggs commanded, his voice calm and focused. The time for strategy was over. It was now all about survival. The fleet's warships, armed with cutting-edge energy weapons and missile systems, retaliated with immediate fury. Pulses of blue and green energy lanced across the void, striking the alien vessels with a force that sent shockwaves through space. But the aliens were quick. Their ships dodged and weaved, and they returned fire with even more force. The battle was raging in all directions, a violent storm of explosions and energy discharges. On the bridge of the Elysium, General Briggs' focus never wavered. "Keep up the pressure. We can't afford to let them get the upper hand." The Elysium fired its forward plasma cannons, sending streams of intense energy into the heart of the alien fleet. Several alien ships exploded, their wreckage tumbling into space. But for every alien vessel destroyed, 2 more seemed to take its place, each one more determined than the last. Back on New Horizon, Rachel Hall and the survivors watched the battle unfold on their makeshift communication screens. They could see the flashes of light in the distance, the telltale signs of a violent conflict taking place in the cold vacuum of space. The fleet was finally engaging the alien invaders. "Look at them go," one of the survivors whispered, awe and fear in his voice. "They're really doing it." Rachel clenched her fists, her heart pounding in her chest. The battle was more than just a fight for revenge. It was a fight for their future. The aliens had thought they could destroy humanity's spirit with the fall of New Horizon, but they had made a fatal mistake. They had underestimated the humans' resilience. The survivors could only watch as the battle between humanity's fleet and the alien invaders intensified. Rachel's mind raced as she thought of how the survivors could help. They had a limited supply of weapons and resources, but perhaps there was still something they could do to contribute. Every single person had a part to play in this war. "Stay sharp," she called to her group. "We may have to fight on the ground soon." In the midst of the battle, General Briggs gave the command to launch the fleet's full offensive. "We're not here to survive," he said coldly. "We're here to win. Everyone, push forward. Engage the enemy with everything we've got." And so they did. The Elysium and the rest of the fleet surged forward, cutting through the chaos of the battle. Ships were destroyed left and right, but the human fleet's firepower was starting to show results. Alien vessels were being torn apart, their shields collapsing under the relentless onslaught. But it wasn't enough. The aliens had something unexpected in their arsenal, a secret weapon. A colossal ship, unlike anything the humans had seen before, appeared from the depths of the alien fleet. It was massive, nearly 10 times the size of the largest human warship. The ship had an intimidating, almost otherworldly design, with black, jagged edges that seemed to shimmer in the cold light of space. "What in the hell is that?" Sarah gasped, her eyes wide in shock. "It's their trump card," Briggs muttered. "Stay focused. We can't let them get any closer." The new alien ship fired, and the shockwave of its weapon was enough to knock several human ships off course. The force of the blast was enough to send the Elysium shaking violently. Its shields flared, absorbing the impact, but the ship's crew was forced to brace for the consequences. "They've got something we didn't anticipate," Briggs said grimly. "But we've come this far. We're not backing down now." The battle had escalated to a new level of intensity. The fleet was outnumbered, but they had one thing the aliens did not: human ingenuity. Every ship, every soldier, every person aboard the warships knew what was at stake. They had the determination to win, no matter what the cost. The war had only just begun, and the outcome remained uncertain. But one thing was clear: humanity would fight to the very end. And they would not go quietly into the night. The battle raged on, each side pushing forward with an intensity that seemed to shake the very fabric of space. The alien fleet, bolstered by their massive secret weapon, continued to pour fire into the human fleet, and yet, despite the odds, humanity refused to yield. Every human warship, from the smallest cruiser to the mighty Elysium, stood firm in the face of the alien onslaught. General Briggs stood resolute on the bridge of the Elysium, watching the chaos unfold. His thoughts were sharp and focused, calculating each move and each strategy. He had already seen too much death, too much destruction, but he wasn't about to back down. Not now, not after everything that had been lost. "We need to stop that superweapon," Briggs said, his voice cutting through the static of the battlefield. His eyes were locked on the monstrous alien ship that had just fired another devastating blast. The shockwave rattled the human ships, pushing them back once again. "It's tearing us apart." Lieutenant Grant, her face a mixture of determination and fear, nodded. "We've already lost several ships, General. If we don't take that thing down, we won't have much of a fleet left." Briggs turned, his gaze hardening. "Then we'll find a way. We have no other choice." Meanwhile, on the surface of New Horizon, Rachel Hall and the other survivors had seen enough. The battle in space had intensified, and the sight of burning ships being torn apart by alien weapons filled them with a sense of helplessness. But Rachel, ever the strategist, knew they had to act. "We can't sit back and wait for the fleet to win this for us," she said, pacing in front of the group. "We need to help. We've seen their tactics, their technology, and we know how they think. There has to be a way we can make a difference." One of the survivors, a former engineer named Jack, stepped forward. "I've been working on something. I might have a plan, but it's going to be risky. If we can infiltrate one of their supply depots." "No," Rachel interrupted, shaking her head. "We need something more direct. We can't wait for them to make the first move. We need to take the fight to them." She paused, her mind working rapidly. There had to be something they could do, something that would turn the tide. And then it hit her, something simple, but effective. "Their main fleet is vulnerable when they're in the process of deploying their weapons," she said, her voice growing more confident. "That's when they're focused, when they're vulnerable. We need to hit them at that moment." Jack's eyes widened. "You're right, but we need to move fast. If we can sabotage their supply lines or disrupt their logistics, we can cause chaos. Their superweapon will be useless without the right resources." Rachel nodded. "Exactly. Let's do this. Back in space, General Briggs was still grappling with the overwhelming odds against them. The alien superweapon continued to dominate the battlefield, and human ships were being picked off one by one. But then, a breakthrough came from an unexpected source. "General," Sarah Grant called out, her voice filled with urgency. "We've got a new signal. It's coming from New Horizon." Briggs' heart skipped a beat. "What? What are they saying?" Grant's eyes flicked across her console as she processed the incoming message. "It's Rachel Hall. She's got a plan, and it's something we can use." Briggs' eyes narrowed. "What kind of plan?" "She wants to disrupt their supply lines, hit them where it hurts. She's offering intelligence on their fleet structure and weakness in exchange for whatever we can spare. She thinks it'll be enough to disable their superweapon." Briggs took a deep breath, the weight of the decision heavy on his shoulders. They were already stretched thin. But if they could take out the alien supply lines, they might just have a chance to turn the tide. "Tell her we're listening," Briggs said, his voice firm. Rachel and her team quickly mobilized. Armed with whatever weapons they could find, they set out on a daring mission to infiltrate the alien supply depot on New Horizon's surface. The team had no illusions about the danger they were in. There was no guarantee they would survive this mission, but the stakes were too high to back out now. They moved swiftly through the dense alien structures that had been built on the ruins of New Horizon. Every corner, every shadow, was a potential threat. The aliens had taken control of the planet quickly and efficiently, but the survivors had learned their tactics over the past few weeks. They knew how to move, how to strike fast and hard. As they approached the supply depot, Rachel felt the weight of the moment settle in. This was it. They had no backup, no reinforcements. It was just them, and their determination to stop the alien invaders. "Keep it tight," Rachel ordered, her voice low and steady. "We do this fast. We do this quiet." Back in space, the human fleet had received the intel from Rachel's team. General Briggs was quick to act. "Launch a full-scale offensive," he commanded, his voice a calm contrast to the chaos unfolding around them. "We're taking down their supply lines. Now." Human ships surged forward, cutting through the alien forces with newfound precision. The tide of battle was beginning to shift. The alien fleet, still reeling from the loss of its supply lines, was faltering. Without the necessary resources, their superweapon began to malfunction. It was clear the aliens had underestimated humanity's resolve. The battle was far from over, but for the first time, the humans had the upper hand. The battle in space was now a frantic and chaotic struggle. Humanity's fleet, bolstered by the disruption of the alien supply lines, had gained a rare advantage. General Briggs watched the situation unfold on the Elysium's main screen, his mind racing with tactics, adjusting to the ever-changing battlefield. The once overwhelming alien superweapon now flickered with instability, its blasts no longer as accurate, and the massive ships that had once seemed unstoppable were now vulnerable, exposed to human fire. But General Briggs knew this advantage wouldn't last long. The aliens, though disoriented, were formidable. They would adapt quickly, and the human fleet was already taking significant casualties. He had to act fast. "Lieutenant Grant, bring our forces around. Target their power cores. We need to finish this now," he ordered, his voice steady, though the weight of the battle bore down on him. Grant's fingers flew over her console, relaying the order. "All ships, focus on power core strikes. Take them down now." The human ships adjusted their formations, weaving through the alien defenses with incredible precision. The initial disarray caused by the destruction of the supply lines gave them a momentary edge, and now they were pressing it. Explosions rang out as human warships launched their final assault, targeting key weak points in the alien ships. But despite the losses, the alien fleet still had strength. They regrouped quickly, launching desperate counterattacks. The superweapon, though malfunctioning, still had enough power to send massive shockwaves rippling through space, shaking the human ships and knocking them off course. The aliens were not finished yet. They still had firepower. On the surface of New Horizon, Rachel Hall and her team had made their way into the heart of the alien supply depot. The mission had been risky, fraught with danger, but they had managed to infiltrate the facility undetected. They moved swiftly through the alien compound, planting explosives where they knew the aliens kept their most important resources. "We've got 10 minutes before the charges go off," Rachel said, her voice a mix of urgency and determination. "We need to get out of here before the whole place goes up in flames." One of the team members, Jack, looked over his shoulder nervously. "I don't like this. The place is too quiet. We're too exposed." Rachel's eyes narrowed, scanning the area. The silence was unsettling, but she couldn't afford to be distracted. "Stay focused. We've got a job to do." They moved through the narrow corridors, their steps quick but deliberate. The alien structures were labyrinthine, but Rachel had spent enough time studying them to know where they were going. As they approached the exit, a loud siren blared through the facility, signaling that the alien forces were aware of their presence. "Too late," Rachel muttered. "We've been compromised." The team broke into a sprint, rushing toward the exit with everything they had. Behind them, explosions rocked the facility as the first wave of charges detonated. The sound of alien soldiers rushing to intercept them filled the air. They were out of time. Back in space, the battle had reached its final phase. The alien fleet, now battered and reeling, tried to regroup around their remaining superweapon. It was their last hope, their final trump card. The Elysium and its fleet were closing in for the kill, and the moment of truth had arrived. General Briggs barked his orders, his eyes fixed on the alien flagship. "Prepare the final assault. We're going for the flagship." As the human fleet closed in, the alien flagship's weapons fired once more. The blast was powerful, but it was erratic, showing signs of wear. The Elysium dodged the shot, and the fleet returned fire in unison. Waves of energy blasts slammed into the alien flagship, striking its shields and slowly wearing them down. The alien forces fought back with everything they had left, but the writing was on the wall. The tide of battle had shifted irreversibly. The Elysium's heavy cannons tore into the alien flagship, breaking through the weakened shields, and finally, the flagship exploded in a dazzling burst of light. A cheer erupted from the human fleet, but General Briggs remained grim. "It's not over yet," he muttered. The battle was still raging, and there were still many alien ships to deal with. But this was a turning point. The aliens had lost their command center, and without it, their forces were lost. Back on New Horizon, Rachel and her team had just emerged from the supply depot, only to find themselves face to face with an alien patrol. The explosion behind them had clearly drawn attention, and now they were trapped. Alien soldiers, heavily armed and with cold, emotionless expressions, advanced toward them. Rachel's heart raced, but she remained calm. She pulled out a small detonator from her belt, a final plan in case things went wrong. She signaled to the team, and they spread out, preparing for their last stand. "Take them down," Rachel said, her voice low but firm. "We fight, and we survive." The team opened fire, their weapons lighting up the night as they engaged the aliens in a desperate battle. The sound of gunfire filled the air as Rachel's team fought with everything they had. It was their last chance to make a difference. Just as the situation seemed most dire, a series of explosions rocked the area around them. The ground shook, and the alien soldiers were thrown off their feet. Rachel didn't need to look up to know what was happening. The human fleet had completed its mission. The alien patrol was distracted by the explosions, and Rachel seized the opportunity. "Move," she shouted. They sprinted for the cover of a nearby building, and as they ran, the detonator went off. The entire depot erupted in a fiery explosion, engulfing the alien soldiers in a massive blast. The sound of the explosion reached the human fleet in orbit. General Briggs turned his head as the shockwaves spread through space, signaling the success of the ground team's mission. The alien forces were crumbling. As the last of the alien ships were destroyed and the survivors retreated in disarray, humanity stood victorious. The battle was over, and the galaxy would never forget the price humanity had paid for freedom. But this was only one chapter of the war. More challenges awaited, and humanity was ready for whatever came next. The smoke and debris from the battle still lingered in space. The remnants of the alien fleet drifted, shattered and broken, scattered across the void. What had once been an overwhelming force now lay in ruins. General Briggs stood on the bridge of the Elysium, his face grim but filled with a quiet pride. The battle was over, but the war was far from won. He knew this victory would send ripples through the galaxy, a message to every species that humanity was not to be underestimated. All ships, report status. General Briggs commanded, his voice firm. One by one, the reports came in from the human fleet. The losses had been significant, but the damage was contained. Ships were intact, the command structure was solid, and the fleet was operational. Humanity had faced one of its greatest tests and had emerged victorious. But victory came at a cost. The alien fleet had been powerful, and the fight had been long and brutal. General Briggs knew that many soldiers would never return home, and families would mourn the fallen. Despite the exhilaration of their triumph, there was an undeniable heaviness that weighed on his heart. "Admiral, any word from the ground team?" he asked, his eyes scanning the stars. Admiral Marlowe, who had been overseeing the human forces on New Horizon, appeared on the screen. "The mission was a success, General. The alien base is destroyed, and the surviving team members are safely on their way back to the extraction point. We've dealt them a blow they'll feel for a long time." Briggs nodded, relief flooding through him. The ground team, led by Rachel Hall, had been the unsung heroes of this campaign. While the fleet had engaged in the battle in the stars, it was the team on the ground that had secured the supply depot, crippled the alien forces' logistical capabilities, and set the stage for the final assault. Their bravery was not forgotten. "We need to ensure they get the proper recognition," Briggs said quietly. Back on Earth, news of the victory spread like wildfire. The entire planet erupted in celebration, but it was a bittersweet victory. Memorials were held for the fallen, and families mourned the loss of their loved ones. The images of the battle, the burning wreckage of alien ships, and the bravery of humanity's finest would be etched into history. Rachel Hall, now back on Earth, sat in the quiet of her apartment, staring out of the window. She was a hero, yes, but she didn't feel like one. The weight of the lives lost in the battle, the faces of the fallen soldiers, lingered in her mind. She had survived, but many had not. The victory was sweet, but the cost was steep. She was pulled from her thoughts by the sound of a knock on the door. She opened it to find a young officer standing before her, a solemn look on his face. "Captain Hall, General Briggs requests your presence on the Elysium. There's something important he needs to discuss with you." Rachel nodded, grabbing her jacket. "Lead the way." Hours later, she found herself aboard the Elysium, standing before General Briggs in the command center. The bridge was bustling with activity as the fleet prepared for their next move. But in the midst of it all, Rachel could sense that something had changed. The weight of their success, their losses, was starting to sink in for everyone. "Captain Hall," General Briggs began, his voice soft but resolute. "You and your team were crucial to our success. Without your efforts, we wouldn't be where we are today." Rachel shook her head, her expression pained. "I didn't do it alone. It was a team effort. Everyone played a part." Briggs smiled slightly. "I know, but you led them. And that's what makes you a leader." Rachel looked away, taking in a deep breath. "I couldn't have done it without the others, without the fleet, without the sacrifices made. We've won, yes, but I feel like we've only just begun." General Briggs's gaze softened. "That's exactly why I ask you here. This victory is a turning point, but it's just the beginning. We've sent a clear message to the galaxy. The aliens who attacked Earth, well, they'll have to answer for what they've done. And we're not stopping until we make sure humanity's future is secure. Rachel's heart raced at his words. The war was far from over. But she knew she wasn't alone in this fight. Humanity had shown its strength, its resilience, and its willingness to stand against impossible odds. "I'm ready," Rachel said quietly, her voice filled with determination. "Whatever comes next, I'll be there." Across the galaxy, news of humanity's victory spread quickly. Some species were skeptical, unsure of how to react to the rise of such a powerful force. Others saw it as a call to arms, an invitation to join forces with humanity, perhaps to form an alliance against a greater threat. The galaxy was changing, and Earth was no longer the quiet, insignificant planet it once was. In the coming weeks, humanity would face many more challenges. The alien forces that had attacked Earth weren't the only ones out there. There were other factions, other enemies, who would test humanity's resolve. But the humans had proven something important. They had proven that they could fight, and that they could win. Humanity's Titan-class warships, once thought to be mere symbols of might, had now become the backbone of a new era of exploration, diplomacy, and defense. And with it, the humans were ready to face whatever came next. The galaxy was about to learn what it meant to face humanity's full might. And the story was just beginning.